Hello and welcome, my critical thinking collective, to my end of year wrap up. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about my 15 best movies of the year. And I'm going to repeat this again for anyone who has something to say regarding this. This is my 15 best movies of the year. Keyword my. I do understand that you're going to have your own. I do understand that you're going to have your own unique point of view. I judge these movies on several criteria, one of them being how well I enjoy them, how well I thought they were put together. There's whatever kind of social impact they might have, meaning the story that they told and the social impact of that story, how well the acting was, if I felt moved by them, if I felt entertained by them. So it's not just going to be based on blockbusters or cool special effects or hot actors, male or female. There's a lot of different things. And again, it is my unique perspective. Another thing to point out is that these movies are not listed in any particular order. I'm not going to be ranking them in any way. I am just listing the movies that from my perspective are must watches, right? These are great movies to watch that you will get something or another from the storyline, and that is why I have them listed here. The first movie I'm going to talk about is The Creator. I love The Creator for two reasons. First of all, I love the visual feel of The Creator. If there was ever a movie out there that I thought was a great representation of what an anime would look like in real life, I would say it's The Creator. The only two movies that I put in that category really are The Creator and the live action version of Ghost in the Shell that Scarlett Johansson acted in. Movies are great. I love the special effects. I love the way it's put together. I typically do not like John David Washington. I thought he ruined Tenet with this sort of deadpan acting he was doing there, just speeding through the lines, no range or anything put into it, almost like he was just reading them and just walking through. So I usually haven't liked him in any movies he's done up to this point. I loved him in this movie. I saw a lot of range. I saw, I felt his pain. I liked the way he had everything sort of like bottled up inside of him, and it slowly came out through the movie. Thought it was a great job. The villain was kind of campy, but that's okay because this is not a movie about the villain, right? And this is not even a movie about the AI or anything like that. This is a movie about the spectacle. This is about a visually stunning story. And a lot of times, visually stunning stories are not always the best, right? And I'm not saying this is a bad story. It's a pretty cool story as well. It's got a nice little twist to it near the end that you find out. It's got a nice character arc for everyone. And I just enjoy it. And it's a timely story. It's about AI and where AI can go and what AI means. As a computer scientist, I can tell you right now that most people's idea of AI is vastly different from the realities of it. And you have to understand there's a difference between companies, global companies, and their marketing campaigns and how they want to present things, and actual reality and what's actually happening. A lot of the things that people are calling AI are large language models, which is a way for a computer to understand what you're saying and be able to sort of put together a response that comes off as relevant to the subject, right? Sentence completion to a certain extent. The computer is not thinking, right? The model is trained, meaning that it's set up ahead of time so that when you put in certain things, variables, it's going to say certain responses, and it has a degree of variance to it, meaning that you can set up the AI so that if you say ABC, it will say DEF. But if you can set it up so that sometimes if you say ABC, it'll say XYZ, right? You can have some variability to it. That's the computer science, open AI, and Microsoft Azure's OpenAI studio. That's what's going on. If there's somebody building something out there conceptually that's actually thinking and talking and not using pre-conditioned responses that are being cleverly programmed, please let me know in the comments. I haven't seen that. So Creator is a great movie. Go watch it. You'll love it. Well put together. John David Washington. You got people with human faces and robot back of the head and all that kind of stuff. Looks really cool. Visually, it's very interesting. Nice take on the universe. Really liked it. Would love to see more from that. Great movie. Next movie that made my top 15 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Now, Volume 3 is not the best of the series, but it's a great close to the series. I think that the director, James Gunn, did a great job sort of like tying it off, ending the story right. We still get the banter. People evolve through it. I thought the story of Rocket Raccoon was very touching. It got a little Noah's Ark near the end. But in general, it was a well-executed film where all the characters stayed consistent with what they are and what they're supposed to be in light of all the craziness happening right now in Hollywood. This movie avoided that and was still able to deliver an exciting, interesting, and compelling story about these characters that we've grown to love over time, and really gave them a pretty nice send-off as a whole. So loved it. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Go watch it. Next great movie of the year, Spider-Man Beyond the Spiderverse. Spider-Man Beyond the Spiderverse was a an awesome movie. Great story, well put together. Of course, amazing animations, no different than Into the Spider-Verse. I like the fact that he'd grown. He was facing different issues now, compelling issues. I thought that the various characters and various versions of Spider-Man in the story were well put together, especially the punk rock Spider-Man I loved. This whole idea of multiple universes and the different variations in those universes and him coming back into a universe that was different from his and whatnot, pretty awesome. Go watch that movie. You'll love it. If I spoiled it in that last sentence, I apologize. Really great motivations for the characters, continuing the character arc of Miles Morales as he grows and becomes more and more of Spider-Man. You know, there's nothing negative to say about it. It's just a great film, very enjoyable, lots of fun. Go watch it if you haven't already seen it, and if you have seen it, then high five. Next movie on my list is a new one, The Killer. The Killer was released to Netflix maybe a month back, not even, maybe less than a month back. This is, again, just a well-made movie. It's not really about anything, but it doesn't have to be about anything. So this is a movie that I would say is almost like, once again, a spectacle and an example of the different ways that an actor can be a good actor. And when you think about action films and movies like this, they are more like silent films than they are like a normal film that you would see with lots of dialogue. So it's more about the physicality of the individual, the main actor, how he interacts, how he moves, what he does, how he's able to represent through physical movements the story that's being told and the situations that he's been put in. There are actors that are very good at doing this and actors that are not very good at doing this. No matter whether or not they get Oscars for being able to sit down and say, "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears," or what have you. Just because you can act verbally does not mean that you can act physically, that you can impart emotion by your movements, by how you move your body, by how you strain your face, those kinds of things. That's a whole nother level of acting that is really looked down on, especially when these movie studios, when they want to make a really good movie, they sort of say, "Oh, well, this guy just won an Oscar, or this girl just won an Oscar. Let's put them in this role in this movie because they have an Oscar," right? Well, this role in this movie is more about physical. So just because they're good at that doesn't mean that they're good at this. That's what makes actors like Tom Cruise so amazing, because he can act legit, but then if you put him in an action sequence in an action movie, he can also act in that other kind of way. He can also physically move in the right way. You could put him in a silent film and he would be a good actor in silent films. That's not true of a lot of the contemporary actors that are out there right now. So for that reason, I thought The Killer was a great film, because obviously immaculate cinematography, immaculate storytelling, well crafted, and the physical acting of Michael Fassbender was just out of this world. He just put it together perfectly. He was very believable as this character that was being put through the various things that he's being put through in the film. You will love this movie if you watch it. It's not just about killing people. In fact, that's a small part of it. Although he does obviously kill people in this film, that's a small part of it. And having a person that can both be believable in the parts of the film where he's talking, and also believable in the parts of the film where he's doing, is critical for a movie like this to be successful. It was meticulously crafted. It was almost crafted the same way as the character that's playing the role. Every frame, every shot, every angle, just building up to a crescendo in the end. Great film. You'll love it. Go watch it if you haven't seen it already. The next movie on my list is The Burial. Great film, very funny, heartfelt, a little bit whimsical, good story from a social perspective, good story, well acted, and just a good film. There's not more to be said about it. When you start this movie, you're pulled immediately into the characters. Once Jamie Foxx shows up, he just steals the movie and takes over, and all the way to the end, you're just waiting for more. I finished watching this movie, and I wished that there was another 30 minutes of it to watch. I loved it. I just can't say enough good things about this movie. Again, if you haven't seen it, please go watch it. It's a great film. The Burial. Go watch it. Next movie on my list is No Hard Feelings, starring Jennifer Lawrence. Now, this movie doesn't seem like the other movies in my list, but I just loved it. It was a throwback to a style of movie making and a style of storytelling that, in this new cynical world that we live in, has just been gotten rid of. Um, I loved it. It was well acted. It was funny when it needed to be funny. It's great scenarios. Jennifer Lawrence showed her acting chops here. Even though it's a comedy, you feel for her character, and you kind of it just takes you back to, like, I guess, the old school 80s, 90s movies, with younger people being silly and whatnot. Raunchy comedy. Great film. Loved it. Not much more to be said about it. Next movie on my list is Renfield. And if there's one word that I would use to describe Renfield, that word would be fun. It's a fun movie. You got Nicolas Cage out there being Nicolas Cage, just just being basically insane on the screen. It's a dark comedy, quite funny. Renfield, in this particular incarnation of the story, uh, has a sort of moral compass and doesn't necessarily uh, want to kill people, or like having people killed for the benefit of Dracula. He uses the opportunity to bring Dracula. Dracula uses him as a familiar to go out and get people for him to kill and eat. And rather than go out and get innocent school children and virgins and things of that nature, he decides to go out and get bad guys and bring them for Dracula to eat, which of course Dracula does not enjoy, because Dracula ultimately does not feed on blood in this, again, in this story. Dracula actually feeds on almost like the blood of the innocent. It's the innocence that's enticing to him. It's how innocent they are, how non-corrupt they are. That's really what he enjoys, and that's what gives him his powers. And of course, hijinks ensue when Dracula eventually finds a way to break away and goes out into the real world and challenges uh, and threatens to take away from Renfield the life that he's made for himself uh, as a normal person living a normal life. Very, very funny, dark comedy. I'm not really sure what it's trying to say. I don't think it's really trying to say much. I think it's just a lighthearted farce, I would say. So if you enjoy, it's like a movie that's off the beaten path. If you just want to be entertained and have a good time from beginning to end without somebody preaching this or that to you, this is a great film to watch. And I would also say it's the same thing with No Hard Feelings. Next movie I enjoyed this year was Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Why is this movie in here? It didn't do very well in the box office. There was only one action set piece, which is a huge departure from the things that Tom Cruise has done in the past. And the movie looked like it was literally being, the story looked like it was evolving from scene to scene. And it was basically being written, they would write the scene and then go and shoot it, write the scene and go and shoot it. That's what it seemed like. Things didn't make no damn sense in this story. And of course, come to find out, now that the movie's out and it was sort of a disaster, they were making the movie up as they went along, and things were being written from scene to scene before they would shoot it. But even regardless of that, I thought this movie was well made. I love the intro sequence. I love some of the sequences in the film. You can't say no to Tom Cruise. You can't say no to Tom Cruise. This man can act. This man puts on a show, puts on a spectacle, and we have to respect somebody like this enough to go and watch his films so that we continue to get, to a certain extent, independent content that's not being driven by pencil pushers who are looking at demographics and analytics and using that to determine the stories that you watch. Go and watch Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 and definitely watch Part 2. The one dig I have about Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning is that the character of Tom Cruise, the character he plays, is not consistent with the character that he has played. It's not consistent with Ethan Hunt, right? That is not what Ethan Hunt would do. And I'm just sorry. So, Tom Cruise, go back, look at your notes, go back and watch all the Mission Impossibles. Watch that scene from The World Is Not Enough where James Bond, played by Pierce Brosnan, takes care of a femme fatale who's like playing around with nuclear codes. And that's what you should have done in this movie, okay? You should have handled that business and gone back to your beautiful woman that's awesome and epic and has saved your life on multiple occasions. Just pushing her to the side to bring some new girl over, that didn't make any sense. That was a trash decision. That being said, this movie was enjoyable if you can get past the annoyance of that character in the film. This is a great film, lots of fun, really enjoyable, and you'll just love it. You'll go through the movie, and at the end of the movie, you'd have had a nice little thrill ride, like every other Mission Impossible, and you'll leave the movie happier than you came in. Will you be discussing the movie at the local coffee shop? No, but you would have had fun. If there was a number one movie, if I was doing this as a countdown and there was a number one movie, then the next movie on my list would be number one, and that is Sound of Freedom. If you haven't seen my review of this movie, please go watch it where I talk about what this movie is about. This movie doesn't necessarily need your support because it made much more money than any of the movies that I've listed so far. Maybe Guardians made more money than it, but it definitely made more money than Mission Impossible. But this movie is actually about something, a major problem going on in the world today that should be addressed. It's well put together, well acted, um, great cinematography, great storytelling. The child actors are amazing in it. The story is awesome. It's high quality. It's not preachy at all, despite what people say. You just have to understand when you watch this movie that there are different motivations that drive people in the world to do things and to do good things. Everybody's not driven by altruistic motives. Everybody is not just a humanist. Everybody's not an atheist. Some people do good things because they are deeply spiritual, deeply religious, and that's what drives them to do that. And there's nothing wrong with telling a story about such a person. It does not make it make it a bad movie or a bad story. The idea of Hollywood crushing this movie and it getting a critic score of 5 in the 5s, while movies like Saw get a critic score in the 9s, is, again, I consider it to be perverse. If not, it's not criminal, but it's definitely perverse. And people who gave it that score, shame on you. Shame on you. The next movie on the list is an absolute thrill ride of a film. If you want to go into a movie and you want to have fun from beginning to end, well put together, creepy yet enjoyable, great visuals, go and watch The Last Voyage of the Demeter. You're going to get scares, but you're not going to be seeing people put screwdrivers into people's, you're not going to see torture. You're not going to see just pointless jump scares. It's just like a little excerpt, a little story beginning to end of just something scary happening to a bunch of people. And then in the end, that's the end. Now, if you don't know the story, just quickly, the Demeter is a ship that Dracula takes when he leaves Transylvania to come to London. So if you've ever seen this movie, Bram Stoker's Dracula, you can think of this as not a prequel, but basically if you watch Bram Stoker's Dracula, Keanu Reeves in the beginning is over there in Transylvania where he signs his life away and does all this stuff, right? And then at some point, Dracula gets on a ship and then the ship sails over to England, and then the story of Dracula continues. In that movie, they don't show anything that happens on the ship. This movie sort of like takes that piece of story right there and tells that story. What happened on the Demeter, and that's basically it. It's more of a monster movie than a Dracula movie. Dracula in this story never takes on his real form. You don't see him as a human being. He's not doing any of the Dracula stuff. He's almost like a beast or like a giant bat in this film. And that's kind of what you see. But the way the story is told, if you put yourself in the position of those people, it's quite terrifying. A great film to watch, The Last Voyage of the Demeter. Go watch that film. Next film on this list is, if this was again a movie where I was ranking films, and I'm sorry that I'm doing this. If this is a movie where I was ranking films, this would be number 2 on my list, and that is Air. This is a story about how Michael Jordan ended up joining Nike and what all the various people from Nike did to basically get Michael Jordan to become, to get the Jordan shoes and sign a deal with Nike and really become who he is from a financial perspective, because he let the floodgates open. He was very maverick and revolutionary with this decision to go with Nike over Adidas and all the other people that were courting him. It's a fun movie. It's got Matt Damon and Ben Affleck in it, and I'm trying to think, but I do not believe I have ever watched a movie with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck where they were principal actors in the story and they had something to do with the creation of it, or it was part of their crew of creators that made it. I've never watched a movie where both of them were in the movie and it was a bad movie. I didn't enjoy it, and this is right along with that. It's just a fun, cool movie. You'll love it because if you're a person of my age, then you sort of know the players, and you know, obviously know Michael Jordan and know what he went on to become. So this is almost like telling the story of his origin. To a certain extent, it's his origin story. Now, what I didn't like about it is that what I didn't like about it is that it plays like a Black Jesus story. Okay, so you know, like, look, Michael Jordan is great, and Michael Jordan is one of the greatest basketball players of all time. I, you know, in terms of a sport like basketball, not all sports, but in a sport like basketball, it is basically futile to call any one person the greatest or not greatest in the sport, because they don't have a frame of reference, and there'll never be a frame of reference where you can compare one versus the other. And I'm not talking about the players or, you know, or anything like that. I'm just talking about the rules. The sport of basketball in 1984, when Michael Jordan was drafted, is not the same sport that's being played today with Steph Curry and LeBron James. About every 10 years, the sport changes. The rule, they make drastic changes to the rule, which affect outcomes. So you can't compare, right? If you can't hand check someone, then how can you, you know, then obviously the person is going to be more free to move around. And if people spend a lot more time, and coaches spend a lot more time telling you that you can shoot three pointers, as many three pointers as you want, then you're going to, you know, you're going to have a disadvantage if you come from an era where if you came down court and just shot a three pointer, you would be on the bench. If you're a big man like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, living in an era where they just want you to stay under the rim and get rebounds and put them up, you obviously are not going to be able to compete with the modern era where there's a three-point line and 7-footers are putting the ball between their legs, bringing the ball up. Centers are bringing the ball up, initiating the offense. It's a different game. They might as well not even call it basketball. They should call it basketball V1, basketball V2, basketball V3. Each era, when they make these drastic rule changes, they literally have to call it a different sport. It's not the same sport being played. So with that in mind, you know, like projecting Michael Jordan as they do in this movie as the greatest basketball player, like a hit piece against LeBron James, is disingenuous at best, because very clearly, if you just think about it analytically, as once the rules change, you're no longer playing the same game. Michael Jordan and LeBron James are not playing the same. They're playing similar games, but they're not playing the same game of basketball. No way. And definitely those old guys that were playing it in a league that only had 8 teams, and where athletes were spending more time training for other sports that were more popular, are clearly not the same as the people playing today. There was no three-point line back then. There was even a time in college basketball, for example, where dunking was banned and it was illegal, right? So you can't compare at all. So that's my only problem with the movie. It's more personal. I just don't think that I thought that the whole, you know, Black Jesus narrative of Michael Jordan was a bit much. He was a very great player. He was great for his era. He was the first of his kind in that era, and he dominated that era because of that. And anybody who's the first of their kind, we've got Wembanyama now, who's, you know, 8-foot wingspan, over 7 feet tall, dribbling the ball, shooting three pointers. He's the first of his kind, and he's gonna have to contend. People are gonna have to contend with him for years to come if he stays healthy and what have you. If he scores a whole bunch of points in this era doing these things, does that make him the same as does that make him better than the guys that are playing the 70s? No, it doesn't make him better. So stop it. The next movie on my list is yet another fun movie that you're just gonna go in and enjoy. But this is definitely like a throwback movie to the old Rambo days, and this is Extraction 2. I thought Extraction 2 might be, from a spectacle perspective of action sequences, the best set of action sequences I've ever seen, hands down. Right? Like there's about 10 to 15 minutes in that movie that's basically just a one shot, like single camera. They make it like a one shot of just action from beginning to end. I mean, it's almost like it almost played like a computer game. Okay, this thing was so intense and just out of this world. And even though we know that the protagonist is going to survive through this thing, it was still enjoyable. They were still able to provide the necessary amount of tension in the film. I loved it. I enjoyed it. It's not a movie that's gonna make you be thinking about anything. But if you're a guy's guy, a dude, so to speak, and you like action films, if you grew up watching Arnold Schwarzenegger, Terminator, Sylvester Stallone, and those kinds of films, this is the new way that those old movies are being made, and this movie was great. I loved it. Can't say enough about it. Please give me more. That's all I can say. Extraction 2, go watch it if you haven't seen it. Next movie on my list, Creed 3. Now, the actors in Creed 3, or one of the actors in Creed 3, is obviously going through personal crisis right now and a lot of controversy. And we have a podcast where we discuss the outcomes of that case and whatnot, myself and Elizabeth. And you can go watch that or listen to that, I should say. It's an audio only podcast, and you can listen to that. We don't pick any sides or draw any conclusions. We really just talk about the social impact of what happened, what he did, what that means, and how that compares to when other people do things like that, or more extreme cases of that. If it was justified for him to even be taking a trial over that, or that's something that was more of like an internal family matter. So that being said, his performance in this movie is quite good. The story is pretty good. The way it's crafted together, it's pretty good. Remember that this movie is actually directed by Michael B. Jordan, so it's pretty cool for his directorial debut to come out with a movie that ends up being number one in the box office. Great film, well put together, cool storyline. I mean, I just love this. It's a Rocky film. What else can I say? I believe they call these movies high concept films. It's a movie where a person is the underdog and fights his way to victory and wins over an overwhelming force. And so we sort of see this play out in the film. Good Rocky film. Good movie to motivate yourself. You'll love it. Next movie on my list is a fun movie with tons and tons of social commentary about things that I truly and deeply identify with, and that is They Cloned Tyrone. First and foremost, it's a cool story, right? So that's the first thing. It's a cool story that's very different, and that's great about it. Number two, it's an intelligent story. It's using satire to sort of tell a story about things that happen every day in poor communities, especially in America, poor Black communities, and it sort of has an interesting take on it. There's a lot of underlying messages that the movie is sort of like representing in story form. It's very funny. Once again, Jamie Foxx takes over this movie. He's in this movie. He takes over this movie as a pimp, one of the heroes of the story. You'll laugh. You'll enjoy it. John Boyega is in it. He plays Tyrone, and he plays the clones of Tyrone. and he plays the overarching, I guess, bad guy in the story, who's creating these clones of Tyrone and doing all these horrible things in this society. This environment that they're in is any hood America, you could say, and the forces that are being played out in this society are essentially being driven by this organization that's trying to somehow get the black community to conform to some ideals that would allow them to more easily be integrated into society. And of course, from the perspective of these guys, I mean, I'm sure they would think that what they're doing is to a certain extent altruistic, but from the perspective of these individuals, integration means obliteration of your own personal identity and personal culture, and essentially becoming some fusion of yourself and whatever is out there. The fact that the story uses the church, fast food restaurants, uh, drug dealers to sort of be the people who are being cloned and who are out there pushing this agenda or this message of either assimilation or annihilation is very poignant. And if you are, if you're not a black person, you may not, if you're not a black person living in America, you may not identify with these underlying themes, and that's fine. Suffice it to say that there's enough for you to watch uh, and enjoy without necessarily delving into what the meanings are underneath everything else that they're trying to present. If you are an African American, or if you are a black person, I should say, then this is a movie that you definitely need to watch. And I would say that this is a call to arms in terms of like awakening from this slumber of reacting to just constant manipulation and just accepting the manipulation as the status quo, accepting it as the way things are, and really start to question the world you live in and why the world is constructed that way and why these things exist in your environment that do exist, right? And change once you awaken and understand it. Start to change and start to revolt against these forces, not in a violent sense, but in an intellectual sense, right? Right. Think critically and use your critical thinking to sort of thwart the messaging that's coming towards you. My final favorite movie of the year is yet another throwback movie in the genre of detective versus psycho, right? And we used to see these movies a lot in the 90s, and we just haven't seen them that much anymore. They've sort of disappeared. The thriller that has some killer somewhere and some psycho and some detective that's not necessarily clean themselves, basically chasing after them. And this is Luther the Fallen Son. Okay? Luther the Fallen Son is a great film. Luther the Fallen Son is a great film. Luther the Fallen Son might be one of the best of this genre of movies that I've seen in ages. Okay? The bad guy has teeth, and the bad guy has agency. They're not a sim. They're not a bot. They're not some generic bad guy that just exists for the purposes of having Luther advance. And Luther has his own character arc and his own journey that he takes in the story, and it goes in very, very unpredictable ways. I mean, I watched this movie and I was shocked at the twists and turns that it took, and I was pleasantly surprised at the overall execution. I went into the film thinking it was going to be some kind of low budge nonsense, and I came out of it like, wow, this is a good movie. This bad guy is scary. And Luther has somebody formidable to contend with. And him prevailing in the end was a good feeling. I enjoyed it. It was well executed. I can't say anything more than you will love this movie. It's for you if you like thrillers. It's a movie you can watch with your significant other if they are a little bit squeamish, because they'll move a little bit closer to you. So those are my 15 best movies of the year. Again, for me, um, I welcome you to leave in the comments below your best movies, all 15. Do not rank them, because we're not doing that here. We don't do that here. It's not about which movie is better than which. It's about which movies collectively you enjoy the most. You thought had a good message, a positive message. You thought was well executed, story well told, and all the other factors that I discussed in the beginning. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe, and until our next video, keep your thinking caps on.